less vulnerable by resisting him and camping out, say at 90 or 80. I'm letting him come all the way in, and then Professor John always emphasized the foot, the leg, and the waist. He said any solution in Tai Chi can be found with the leg and the waist. So I'm going back, and I'm making myself intentionally quite vulnerable. So in order to yield and find a way out. And the reason he did this, the reason why he emphasized this, comes from a question that I heard someone put to Ben Lowe. And they said, Ben, I do the form this way, then I do this. Which way is the correct way? And Ben Lowe said, which way is the hardest? And he said, oh, this way. And he said, yeah, that's right. That's the right way. So if we look at the medical research, first of all, does anyone know, not my students, but anybody else, what has medical research found to be the most valuable exercise for human beings? Tai Chi Chuan. Tai Chi Chuan. Yes. Head and shoulders beyond anything else, Tai Chi is the most valuable human exercise. Okay? Who knew that? Okay. So what is it about Tai Chi, this unusual exercise, that makes it so incredibly valuable? And let me step back. I've looked at a lot of the Tai Chi research, and all forms of Tai Chi are not equal. Some of them are about the same effectiveness as yoga, and others are clearly far better than that. And so on average, Tai Chi is much better than anything else. And I have a little theory, and I think it is that whoever practices old school Tai Chi gets the most benefit. And I think Professor John, in his genius as a Chinese traditional doctor, and from his writings, I think that he understood that, and maybe he got that from the Yangs, just verbatim. As you know, Professor John did edit Yang Shenfu's only book. Professor John Menching edited that. So when we sit back and we use the legs in Tai Chi, in that Tai Chi way, I think we get a bang for our buck that really is quite unique. And I think that's what they are registering in the medical research. And so I would suppose to you that when you emphasize the yielding of push-hands, you're really vibrating your leg and making strenuous your muscles in a completely unique way. In a way that is sort of the most Tai Chi-like. After all, no one can argue that Tai Chi is the art of softness and yielding. So to avoid that type of practice suddenly from our push hands, I think is a very, very deep and grave mistake. And of course, when you come to an environment where there are people from other schools and people from other disciplines who are trying to make a reputation or defeat you, it's extremely difficult, I know, in that environment to sit back on your leg and try and yield and wiggle a way out. So oftentimes, maybe in that situation, unless you're really getting good, or you really want to be very, very disciplined in your push hands practice, maybe don't do it then. But I think the practice is so important that you ought to develop a little cadre of trusted Tai Chi friends that you can practice this way with. And as both of you are standing 70-30, you're letting them push you back, and you're also letting them violate certain other principles like uprightness, okay? It's okay to rock back. It's okay to fold forward. It's okay to do that. It's best if you do that you keep the spine straight. So as I'm folding forward here, right, I'm not really bending the spine, right? I'm twisting, I'm leaning back, but the spine is not really broken, okay? So it is good to let yourself get that way and become vulnerable in that way and go to those places and work those areas out. And the key area that you quickly find that is the hardest to protect, and therefore if you practice on someone and go there a lot, you'll find that their most vulnerable spot, of course, is here all the way back and trying to turn the waist all the way out. That's when they're going to be at their most tense, give you the most resistance, and your best training for Qigong, comes from that. But if you don't go there and you always mask it and cover it up, you're never going to make it more powerful. Look at it. Just the anatomy of the thing is, all the way back here with my leg turned out, the leverage on my leg muscles is at the most extreme. So if I think that Tai Chi is not a thing of Qi, if I think it's just another thing of muscle, well, it's not a contradiction. You'd get more training there than you would in any other position. But by going into that place where you are the most vulnerable, you're going to get the most benefit. So if you want to see your Tai Chi improve, I think Professor understood this, and this is why he was so insistent upon this discipline and this practice of yielding, sinking, going back, and turning the waist, and letting yourself be vulnerable and try and soften and get out of those predicaments. So, first, if you choose to practice this, find a cadre of people that you trust, that you know are not going to try and break your leg, and get with them and do it. You can even do it in a drill. Step up here, please. So we're both 70-30. So he's just going to, we've got a drill here, push on my hip. So he's just going to push, and I'm just going to go back and let him do it and let him work. Okay? Right? So we get there, we actually work it. I could throw in a little drill that Huang Xixian had and just turn my waist and turn his hand off in a rollback with his hand. So he's just pushing, push, and I'm just turning out, push, right? Thanks. Yang Zhenfu said, if you set up the waist in this way, if you do it 100 times a day, it'll really improve your Tai Chi. If you do it thousands of times a day, it will be even better. So what are we doing? We're going to the place where we're most vulnerable, where we're most under load, where we're most under strain, and practicing Tai Chi. It's very easy to relax lying down. It's a little bit harder to relax and sit down. It's definitely harder to relax and stand up. And that's where Tai Chi begins. Sitting meditation happens when people are sitting. And I find it very interesting that after however many thousands of years they've been doing it, no one has a lore of badass martial artists in sitting meditation. And I found that very interesting looking at the medical research to see that sitting meditation was below walking and sitting as an exercise. So it wasn't even close to Tai Chi. So something magical happens to the human body that is traceable in science when we combine meditation That's not my son. I hope it doesn't crash. My son's 12. So when you sit down and you meditate, obviously we get tremendous benefits. But something hugely different happens when we stand up and meditate. And then we take it to another level of difficulty when we start moving and meditating. I believe it was Mr. Smith who called Tai Chi moving meditation. Is that right, Russ? Russ, local Tai Chi historian. So Mr. Smith was the one who talked about Tai Chi being moving meditation and looking in on the inscape rather than the landscape. So when you do a form and you're moving and trying to meditate, it takes it to another level of difficulty. It takes it also to another level of difficulty when you start trying to hold postures and meditate. And you put the leg severely under load and strain. And then, perhaps highest of all, it is hardest of all to meditate when somebody's coming at you and they're trying to throw you on the ground. So you can, act like Ben Lowe without his skill, and just because he had arrived, and sit there sometimes and practice that way. But once again, I reiterate, for your own benefit, think about yielding, sitting back when they're coming at you, and meditate. Lastly, so you do it as a drill with a trusted friend, and you just sequentially go through the movements. Even this is really good. And as you do it with them, when you're pushing on them, when you start to feel their balance and you start to feel them come off the ground, I would suggest in the first phase of practice, let them go. Don't push them out. Let them have a chance to wiggle out. Let them have a chance to orchestrate their body and neutralize that energy. Later on, or in another phase of practice, then when they resist, then go ahead and try and T-Fong. And they'll be back there, which is where you should be practicing T-Fong anyway, where they can fight you the least. I think I covered the high points. Any questions? And forgive me for speaking for so long, but the microphone needs to be used. Yes?
Just follow your yielding practice. Isn't they also called investment or loss?
Yes.
Could you comment?
Yes. Great point. That was Professor Zhang's term, investment loss. Right, Russ? So, Professor described 3 losses. And I turned one of my students onto it, Asher over here, and he went on and he found it online. And he said, this is a fascinating essay that Professor wrote. And Professor has a jiu-jitsu school, and so he started showing it to his jiu-jitsu students who found Professor's words extremely enlightening. So Professor said the first loss is the loss of comfort. So that you practice your Tai Chi where you are using your legs strenuously enough that you're not comfortable. You're pushing yourself. In other words, you find a way where Tai Chi can become hard work. The other investment in loss was, these were the freedom from fear of loss. And so that when you're doing push hands, even if you're with a big galoot, go back, listen, turn out, soften, and yield, and try and get your way out of it. That is the most valuable practice. The other freedom from fear, sorry, I'm conflating 2 essays, but so, invest in loss, be unafraid of losing, was Professor's admonition. And the last one was freedom from fear of being injured. So, when you're facing someone in push hands, or you are finding yourself in a situation of conflict, you look at them as a child or a puppy, and there's no way they can hurt you. So that you are calm and Tai Chi-like, and it does the things to the brain that Tai Chi does. Any other questions? Great question.